In the summer of 1944, German reconnaissance faced a baffling situation. American armored divisions materialized in impossible locations, vanishing just as quickly. As enemy commanders searched for answers, the truth lay in the French countryside, where shortly after D-Day, two Frenchmen riding on their bicycles stumbled upon an incredible sight. A group of 4 soldiers of the United States Army's 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, or the Ghost Army, were seamlessly lifting a 40-ton Sherman tank and turning it like a toy. As the cyclists gawked for answers, frozen in disbelief, Soldier Arthur Shilstone simply shrugged and said, quote, "The Americans are very strong." While other units required massive convoys and rail transport to move their heavy equipment, this covert unit arrived at the front lines carrying their tanks, howitzers, and aircraft in something far more unusual: canvas bags. The Ghost Army. Amid the monumental preparations for D-Day, Allied commanders assembled an army of staggering size. Over 1 million soldiers, tens of thousands of vehicles, and mountains of supplies, all ready to confront Hitler's defenses with a military might never seen before in warfare. But hidden among this colossal force was a peculiar unit with an entirely different mission: creativity and deception. The idea initially came from Major Ralph Ingersoll during a collaboration with the British on Operation Fortitude, a campaign to mislead German forces about the actual D-Day invasion site. Ingersoll saw the potential for a similar project with a uniquely American twist. With Colonel Billy Harris of the Special Plans Branch, they came up with a simple yet audacious proposal: a single mobile team, capable of creating the illusion of multiple entire divisions using visual and sound tricks to confuse the Axis enemy. With Colonel Harry Reeder's support, the United States Army's 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was officially activated at Camp Forest, Tennessee on January 20th, 1944. The unit assembled 82 officers and 1,023 enlisted men, blending 3 established groups with a newly created one. Together, they had the massive task of crafting battlefield illusions to terrorize the Germans in a modern-day Trojan horse operation. Because the Ghost Army was unlike any unit the military had ever assembled, in order to find the right candidates, the branch pulled talent from art schools, advertising agencies, and theaters. Soon, soldiers from all walks of creative life joined the war effort, not because of their combat abilities, but because of their capability to think outside the box, including painters, actors, sound technicians, and other creatives. Now came the task of organizing the unit, defining each group's role, and preparing them for World War II's most unorthodox mission: the art of deception. The largest and most vital branch of the Ghost Army was the 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion, responsible for the visual deception arm of the unit. This 379-man team of camouflage experts crafted illusions to trick enemy reconnaissance, making Allied forces appear far more significant than they truly were. To this end, the 603rd was equipped with an arsenal of inflatable tanks, cannons, jeeps, trucks, artillery, and even aircraft. Using gas-powered air compressors, the men could rapidly inflate these lifelike dummies, strategically arranging them to mimic real military assets. Once on the battlefield, within just a few hours, the 603rd could transform empty fields into bustling military operations, complete with dummy airfields, motor pools, artillery batteries, and even tank formations. All the equipment was imperfect in its design, ensuring it looked genuine to enemy planes flying above. Other touches included fake encampments, complete with faux laundry flapping on clotheslines. As Jack Maisie, a man recruited into the Ghost Army at age 18, remembered, quote, "We were told we were going to be using inflatable equipment to try and fool the Germans into thinking that we were a real army, when we were, in effect, I suppose, a rubber army." Sound and protection. While the 603rd's visual deceptions were ingenious, the visual branch of the Ghost Army could only achieve so much on its own. With the Germans relying heavily on intercepted communications and radio transmissions for their intelligence, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops Signal Company Special was formed to exploit this vulnerability. This 300-man unit specialized in spoof radio, creating elaborate fake radio networks to mislead enemy forces. Operators, experts in voice acting, impersonated real units, mimicking the distinct tapping rhythms or fists of individual Morse code operators, patterns as unique as handwriting. Once believed impossible to replicate, the Americans flawlessly imitated these personalized signals, convincing German intelligence that real Allied units were still present, long after they had moved on. The smallest unit in the Ghost Army was the 3132nd Signal Service Company, a sonic deception group brought together under the direction of Colonel Hilton Rayleigh, who led the unit in developing groundbreaking techniques. With help from engineers at Bell Labs, the company recorded sounds of military activity, including troop movements, bridge construction, armor divisions, and more, onto sound effects records at Fort Knox. The sounds could be meticulously mixed using state-of-the-art wire recorders to fit the specific scenario they wanted to portray on the battlefield. Once deployed, the Ghost Army men hauled 500-pound speakers mounted on half-tracks and blasted these soundtracks, which could be heard up to 15 miles away. Especially effective at night, the tactic misled enemy observation posts into believing that Allied forces were gearing up for major operations. The 3132nd even traveled with a mobile weather station to adjust for terrain, wind, and other factors to make their deceptions as convincing as possible. Altogether, the 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion, Signal Company Special, and the 3132nd Signal Service Company combined could create powerful illusions of military might where none existed. However, these artists, radio men, and sound engineers needed an actual security force should they encounter the enemy head-on. That job belonged to the 406th Engineer Combat Company, headed by recent West Point graduate Captain George Rebb, a 168-man security force that served as the Ghost Army's perimeter, posing as military police at checkpoints, assisting with visual deception whenever possible, constructing fake artillery positions, and using bulldozers to create the illusion of tank tracks. Showtime. After training day and night in Tennessee, the Ghost Army sailed for the United Kingdom in early May 1944, where they were rebased near Stratford-upon-Avon in England. Mere days after the iconic amphibious landings of D-Day, the group launched its first mission, sending a small platoon from the 603rd Camouflage Engineers, led by Lieutenant Bernie Mason. As the team landed on Omaha Beach, the peaceful memories of England faded, as despite their mission relying on deception, the realities of war were impossible to ignore. Soldier Victor Dowd later reflected, quote, "The wild difference between last night in the lovely, quiet, serene countryside and the grim reality of today. The fighting was within earshot." Working alongside the 980th Artillery Battalion, the platoon mimicked their movements using inflatable rubber howitzers, staying just ahead of the real unit as they advanced through France. For nearly a month, their phony guns drew enemy fire, all while the actual unit moved largely unscathed through key positions. After 28 days, the ruse was declared a complete success. With every platoon member returning unharmed, the Ghost Army's first mission finally proved deception could rival artillery in power. As the Allied armies moved east, advancing toward Germany, so did the U.S. Army's 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, their 1,100 members projecting the strength of 2 divisions, approximately 30,000 men. Between the 23rd's 4 primary arms, the Ghost Army covered every battlefield deception angle. But in Allied-occupied towns, a new threat emerged. Enemy collaborators and spies, lurking for any scrap of intelligence. To counter this, the Ghost Army transformed into a traveling roadshow. Arriving in French villages recently abandoned by German troops, they staged productions known as Atmosphere. Convoys of trucks drove in endless loops, carrying just enough visible soldiers and gear to convince observers they were transporting entire units. Real tanks and artillery were sometimes positioned at the edges to enhance the illusion. Fake military police, wearing counterfeit divisional insignias, directed traffic at key crossroads, while others donned the uniforms of generals and staff officers, making grand appearances to draw attention. Armed with loose scripts and a deep understanding of German behavior, these trained actors-turned-soldiers took to as many bars and markets as they could, chatting loudly with heavy accents about false troop movements and planting misinformation in every ear they found. Curtain call. The Ghost Army's journey continued as the Allies advanced. Their costliest operation came in the summer of 1944, where their efforts to hold a vulnerable gap in General Patton's line during the assault on the city of Metz, simulating the 80th Infantry Division, resulted in 2 casualties. Nonetheless, the 23rd continued contributing to key efforts during the Battle of the Bulge in late 1944. Eventually, the Ghost Army's main base was within Luxembourg, from where it engaged in deceptions of crossings of the Ruhr River, positions along the Maginot Line, and Hurtgen Forest. Time and time again, the Ghost Army's men repeatedly imperiled their own lives to protect others operating near the front lines. By the spring of 1945, there was no denying that the Allies had the upper hand in Europe, but there was still a long way to go. That March, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops launched their final and most daring deception, Operation Biersen. As the Allies prepared for the critical crossing of the Rhine River near Wesel, Germany, the 23rd got to work, transforming empty fields near the Nazi defenses into a convincing illusion of a powerful military buildup, every detail carefully crafted to simulate the 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions gearing up for an assault. According to documentary filmmaker Rick Beyer, an expert on the matter, quote, "They had hundreds of inflatables set up. They had their sound trucks operating for multiple nights. They had other units attached to them. They'd set up multiple phony headquarters and staffed them with officers who were pretending to be colonels. This was an all-hands-on-deck affair. Fully convinced their enemy was closing in, German reconnaissance took the bait and redirected their forces and artillery toward the decoy site, thus leaving the actual crossing point lightly defended. With the ruse working flawlessly and according to plan, under the cover of this smokescreen, the actual Ninth Army was able to surge across the Rhine with very little resistance, securing a vital foothold in the final push into Germany." Decades-long secrecy. As the war in Europe came to an end, so too did the Ghost Army's mission. Over the course of the conflict, during their more than 20 operations, they are credited with saving between 15,000 and 30,000 American lives. According to a post-war Army analysis, quote, "Rarely, if ever, has there been a group of such a few men which had so great an influence on the outcome of a major military campaign." Despite being pioneers of tactical battlefield deception, their stories stayed hidden for decades. For years, Ghost Army veterans quietly carried their secret until April 1985, when Smithsonian Magazine published an article revealing its incredible wartime exploits. In the document, Arthur Shilstone, the illustrator and soldier spotted lifting an inflatable tank by a French man, shared his unique experiences, finally bringing the unit's secretive operations into the public eye. From there, interest in this incredible and secretive story grew more and more, inspiring the formation of a dedicated society to preserve their legacy. Filmmaker Rick Beyer delved even deeper, releasing a critically acclaimed documentary in 2013. Finally, in March 2024, nearly 80 years after the unit's epic arrival in France, the Ghost Army earned the recognition it deserves with a Congressional Gold Medal. Held at the United States Capitol, in attendance were 3 of the 7 known surviving members: Bernard Bluestein, 100, John Christman, 99, and Seymour Nussenbaum, 100. During the event, Senator Mitch McConnell stated, quote, "Our nation has been slow to recognize these men's incredible achievements as they helped win a world war, as well as develop top-secret ways to help preserve a hard-won peace through the Cold War. But today, the veil of secrecy is gone, as a grateful nation knows how you answered the call in a time of need. America will never forget your service."